is Kathleen from A Great Good Place for Books, and I am so excited to introduce you to Tracey Lange. She is the author of one of my very favorite books of the year called We Are the Brennans. And as everybody jokes, if there's a screwed up Irish Catholic family, I'm usually there. And another thing that's super exciting for Tracey is this is her debut novel, which is pretty amazing, getting this kind of attention for a debut. And I can tell you, there's so much I love about this book, and I just can't wait to start talking to you. So welcome, Tracey. And Samantha, welcome.
Very excited to be here.
Yes, thank you.
So what gave you the idea to set this? I know you live in Oregon, but you grew up in New York.
Yes.
And so setting it in Westchester County, was that always something that you thought you would do, or how did the book come into being?
As soon as I landed on the idea, the kind of messy Irish Catholic family, in my mind, just because of my own experience, that's where it needed to be. It's where I grew up and have family all throughout New York, but I didn't want to go in the city. I kind of wanted a smaller town feel. So that's why I moved it up into Westchester. But I wanted it close to the city, and that's the world I knew so well in relation to this story. So I kind of landed on the location pretty quickly. And
did you start this while you were in grad school? Because I know that you did an online grad school, right?
Yeah, I did. I actually came to novel writing a little bit later than a lot of people. I was always drawn to writing, but for a long time, I kind of thought it was this magical set of skills and creativity that I probably couldn't do. And so I went another direction for many years. I was in the behavioral health care field and worked with at-risk youth and families from all walks of life. And then when I stepped away from all that about 7 years ago is when I kind of jumped in full-time with novel writing. And I did complete a 2-year program online through Stanford University. And I started this book before that program, and I did work on it through part of that program. So that certainly was a help. I was learning a lot while I was working on the novel.
So you mentioned that, and I read that in one of your bios about the work you did for a number of years with behavioral health. And I had to imagine that those experiences might have informed kind of how you chose to focus on secrets and shame and the toxic effects of that as they kind of ripple through family systems, which I thought was just a very interesting angle. I really appreciated that. So I just would love to hear more about sort of how that part came to you. And
yeah, definitely part of it was growing up in that culture, but after so many years of working with families of all different needs, children with all different diagnoses, adults with different diagnoses, you got such a close-up look at all kinds of families and how they operate, and our goal was always trying to help them with improve their quality of life. And so certainly all of that work and getting to know their stories, and often I was writing assessments, so I was kind of telling their stories in that sense. That definitely all fed my focus on family, for sure. So there's certainly not one person or experience, but just all of that, working with those dynamics. And again, just growing up in that world, it kind of naturally took me in that direction.
Well, I mean, it is a world. I mean, I try to explain that to people. I mean, it's a culture. And I mean, when we moved to California, my dad found a neighborhood that was primarily Irish.
Yep.
Because as my mom said, he couldn't be away from the tribe.
Yeah, they definitely kind of find each other almost everywhere, I think. But yeah, you meet certain people, and sometimes it doesn't take long to just make that connection, and they know, they recognize that. So it is its own little world for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things that it's always been kind of a given that there's a lot of secrecy in Irish Catholic families, they kind of embrace it in a way as part of their culture. You know, they don't want the neighbors to know what they're doing and blah blah blah. And
yeah,
I mean, that was for Maura. That was her the beginning of her downfall when Shane was diagnosed as being developmentally disabled.
Right.
And she took it upon herself that it was her fault that he was.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of, and I think it's gotten better certainly over time. But I know that in my own family with older generations, there were just sort of things that we sensed but didn't really talk about. As much fun and affection as there was, and a loyalty to the nth degree. And there were just things that you didn't talk about really that maybe we do now but didn't then. And it kind of trickled down through generations. And it definitely, at least in my experience, was tied largely to the Catholic religion. And I know everybody has different experiences with that, but there was a lot of focus on sort of hiding flaws and mistakes you've made. And so, yeah, it's sort of just really ingrained in there.
But I like how Mickey kind of hides from his kids that he was an active member of the IRA.
Yeah.
I mean, they've all got it figured out. They all know he was, but he never admits to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people, even in the pre-Troubles era, because I had an Uncle Michael, and we used to always ask him why he left Ireland. And he would say to us, "Oh, love, I was in a wee bit of a hurry." That was all he would ever say.
Yeah, it is like that. It is like that. We would ask questions, and my dad was not in the IRA. I did weave lots of little bits of his story into Mickey's story, but he wasn't a member of the IRA. But we definitely would ask questions, and there's, you just kind of get this, you get kind of a half answer sometimes. So it's always been kind of interesting that we have to dig at it a little bit.
Well, it was funny. We found out what he had done when he left, when we all went in mass to a family wedding about 15 years ago in Ireland. My cousin got married there, and 25 of us came from America to go.
Wow.
And we found out that, yes, Uncle Michael was in the IRA.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
all he would ever tell us. "Oh, love, I was in a wee bit of a hurry."
That was it. Yeah, they don't give you the full story. Yeah, but that's,
and they usually are grinning.
That played into that too. If you grew up around the Troubles, there were definitely things you didn't talk about, and you didn't want to think about, and that's where my dad and his family came from, Northern Ireland. So
my family's from the South.
Okay, yeah.
I was just thinking about, as you both were talking, the other element, I appreciate the Catholicism, and then obviously if you were involved in the IRA, there's secrecy there. And then I remember reading a story about a very small, tight-knit community somewhere in Alaska, and it was a therapist actually talking about how challenging it was to try to get people to talk. And she said culturally in this community, it wasn't a Catholic community, but it was because of how small the community was, that they actually erred on the side of just keeping a lid on it, because it felt like such a delicate balance. And so it was this challenge of that. And I wonder for a lot of Irish communities, if you came from a smaller community and then you gather together and create another, and sort of everybody knowing everyone's business in a way. So that might add to some of that culture as well. Interesting.
Yeah. It's just this kind of instinct to protect yourself and your own, so yeah, I definitely think that played into, I know it was part in my family, and it certainly played into the book too.
Yeah.
But I had a question. What was it like to introduce Vivian into the group? Because I know she only has one chapter that comes from her point of view, but it's like Denny had her number from the beginning, because he's the one who's always saying, "I don't think that pregnancy was a mistake, was an accident."
Right. Yeah, Vivian, I enjoyed Vivian actually, because I liked being able to present. She's one of the few ways to sort of present the flip side of the Brennans, I guess, the outsider view. And I thought that was important. And she, of all the characters, right, could kind of give a distance view her, you know, what she thinks of them. And but yeah, Denny does kind of suspect from the beginning, from the get-go, what's going on there. But I also, you know, my goal was to present the other side of Vivian. There's more there. You know, she comes from her own story and her own history, and she's doing the best she can too in her way.
It's funny when you look at her mother, because Mickey points out that her mother calls her the you know, the gossip.
Yes.
Who dresses trashy.
Right. That's Mickey's take on it. Yeah. But again, I was happy. You know, there were so many points of view, and at one point I was a little worried about that because, you know, there was a lot of caution. You know, people can get confused or lost, but I really did want Vivian in there for that chapter, so we got to look at where she came from and why, you know, what shaped her really. So
well, because I mean, I do think she chose Cale.
In my mind, yeah. He felt like
he was the most available.
Yeah.
And she also knew he would never walk away.
Yes, I think that was the key. You know, she'd kind of tried for setting her sights on higher things, and it didn't really work out. So, yeah, I think that was played into it.
Well, she could wrestle him, but she couldn't keep him.
Right. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry, my son started talking to me. I apologize.
No problem.
No, I really appreciated her, and I thought you did a beautiful job of sort of this balanced view of her, because obviously, like, she is the outsider, and I had a lot of sympathy for her because no matter what she does, it's like she's never gonna break in, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course when Sunday returns, it's like, oh, how can you compete with that?
I know.
Like, oh, that's just,
I know, it was a tough setup for Vivian.
It was rough. It was really rough for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was curious, you mentioned you sort of peppered a little bit of your dad into Mickey, some of those things. And how did the different characters kind of evolve and come to you? And were there any surprises? Because I thought you did a beautiful job actually at keeping that all clear. And I love that device you use where you use the line to kind of, you know, begin the next piece, which was a lovely kind of chain. But yeah, I just was really curious, like who popped up, and, you know, were there any surprises in that as you developed them?
As far as who popped up, I started with just this notion of someone coming back into the family fold after being gone for many years. And then I landed on Sunday. She was really the first person that I came up with. And then when I kind of thought about her family and it led into brothers, I thought it would be interesting for her to be the only girl. And, you know, just, I thought that'd be an interest, like a big brother. And so Denny was really the second character I landed on. And then I thought about, you know, what else, who would play out, how else can I flesh out this family, and who has what, you know, personality and strength. And so they kind of grew from there. I think Cale was probably the third character I landed on. I loved the idea of Denny's business partner and this kid that was kind of adopted into the family. So they kind of came naturally. And as far as a surprise, probably Vivian. I wasn't, you know, she took a while to figure out. I don't know that she was a surprise, but going in, I felt like I had the family down to a large degree, but I needed to get a better handle on her. And so digging into her was fun and a little unexpected, probably. Yeah. And I'm glad that you know, that line of dialogue, so many people have pointed that out. And I started with that from the get-go in draft one. And I think it was just, I didn't know if it would stick or work for sure, but it was a way for me to just, it was kind of structure almost when I had so many points of view. And in the end, it seemed to work out. There were only a couple chapters that were kind of hard to work around that, you know, but anyway, it stood the test of time, I guess. So
that's good.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I like the most about the book is the just kind of the deep love this family has for each other. I mean, it is like, I don't know, I think you find that in a lot of Irish families, that they just, you know, you can screw up and they still, you know, they'll give you shit about it, but they still love you.
Yes, I think that's true, at least in my experience. I mean, that's what I know. And so yeah, that I came by pretty naturally, just coming from a family, you know, I have so many untold number of relatives in Ireland that I only get to see every so often. And but it does feel like if I needed something tomorrow and we do reach out to each other about various things. And it does feel sort of special to be part of this clan that's out there, that you've got these people. So that, that certainly played into the story for sure.
Well, I mean, I can tell you from my own experience that both sides, my Irish and my Scottish sides, I mean, the loyalty is just phenomenal, you know, I mean, and they're both Catholics, and my Scottish side is actually half Irish. So, I mean, we're like, my uncle was, my grandfather was and he was a Protestant who fell in love with a Catholic in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And so we all know what happens. They left and went to Connecticut and had 13 children.
Okay,
and they left and went to Scotland. So I have like oodles of aunts and uncles and cousins.
Yeah, my dad was one of 15. He had 7 brothers and 7 sisters, and his neighbor had 22, so they weren't even the special ones on the block, so to speak.
I know my grandmother was only from a small family of 9.
Yeah, that's what my mom's mom. Yeah, and so there were just so many aunts and uncles, and they all had multiple kids. And at last count, I had 56 first cousins. So there were just, and my own family my immediate family was small. I just have one brother, but we were just surrounded. You know, my mom's family was all in New York, and so then we would go to Ireland all the time. So there was just family, it felt like, everywhere.
Wow, that's amazing. How do you do that as a mother? Like 22? Like
I don't know. My granny had 15, and she, you know, I can't remember off the top of my head how long she lived, but she was one strong lady, and all of her kids just think the world of her and look up to her. Yeah, so you know, I'm sure she and my granda, they kind of instilled that loyalty, just like every generation does. So
yeah, I remember I met a woman who was from a really large family, and someone commented to her like, yeah, you always hear that like the kids kind of end up raising each other, and this woman just shook her head and said, yes, but not very well.
Yes. Yeah, my dad.
I think families that come from that big one, they kind of, even if they don't have a lot of kids, they kind of leave the kids to raise themselves.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We always used to joke that we had a 5-year-old mother when we were born, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The older ones took care of the next gen, you know, the next group. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But sure. I have to admit, I mean, I think that the loyalty of the Irish is instilled in us. I mean, we are incredibly loyal to each other.
Yeah.
You know, and incredibly close. I mean, Samantha can attest, my family's in the store all the time.
Yeah, it's true. I think it is a big part of the culture. Again, in my experience, it has been for sure. Yeah. They definitely show up.
Oh, so one question. I don't think this is a spoiler, but I was curious to have Denny have the last word, so to speak. Right, because he has the final chapter.
He does.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that decision? Because it sort of felt like the story's about Sunday in a lot of ways, but
yeah, I you know, I guess it was just at the beginning of the book, of course, we start, you know, with Sunday and the accident very briefly, but then we immediately move to the Brennan home in New York, and there's Denny alone in the kitchen, you know, worried and anxious about various things, particularly, of course, you know, the pub. And so I just sort of wanted to mirror that, I guess, at the end. And I also, I think part of the reason I probably went with Denny is because of the thoughts that he has about his mom at the end. And I liked that idea too, of working that in. And it did seem like that would probably be Denny more than anybody else. so yeah, I would say I knew it wanted to be there in that location, and and it just sort of made sense, I think, to come at it from Denny's point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a question. How come you didn't give Teresa a chapter?
I got to the point where I already had to cut many words. And I would have loved to give her a I would love to give other people a chapter, but it kind of got to the point where I needed to limit it. And frankly, Teresa wasn't really hanging on to any secrets. One of the reasons I went with so many points of view was because it was a fun way to pull the reader in to some of the secrets without giving them away to other characters. And, some people weren't holding any. Teresa's pretty clean here. And Shane, of course, and some of the, other kind of secondary characters are also. So
I have to admit, I hated Maura.
Yeah.
I thought she was evil.
Oh,
I can understand that. And,
I think we all have a Maura in our background.
Yeah. Yeah. She's tough. She's really tough. I hoped to present at least where some of that came from, because it does come from somewhere, something shaped her like everybody else. But certainly she was tough. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think of her as evil. I did have some, clearly, she had her issues, but I had sympathy for her,
Good.
I did. And I think also, like, the other piece about the men, and feel like Kale's sort of an exception. He seems like a more emotionally developed guy at a younger age, but like these men, they sort of what they think it means to be a man and what they're supposed to maintain in terms of, being in charge and got everything under control. And right. That's part of why they keep the secrets they keep, at least in part. And to try to be in a long-term relationship with a guy like Mickey, even though he's charming and beloved in the community and all these things, but there's a lot he's not telling her all the time.
Right. So, and he's not super present, which is hard. And so, yeah, I wasn't able to do a more point of view chapter, but I hope to at least get across some of that, that
she had his number.
For her.
She had his number.
Yeah.
She knew what he was up to.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, we don't talk about that.
No, of course not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So are you currently working on anything?
I am. I've kind of been diving into another family story, different dynamics, but I think this one is shaping up to be a bit more of a focus on kind of overcoming some of the burdens of your childhood or family history. So another messy family it's shaping up to be, but a different
Those are my
story.
favorite.
Yeah, me too. Go figure.
Well, it's so funny. It's I saw this book on some pre-pub thing before they even had galleys, and I wrote right away and I said, I need to read this. And I think I got the book like 4 or 5 days later.
Oh,
and
wow.
read it in like 2 days, and I just fell in love with it. And then I read it again and finished so that I could see if there were any changes, because I do that when I really like the book. I'll read the galley and then I'll look for changes.
Sure. Yeah.
I know that's called the publishing dork in me.
I can understand that. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
But there was so much of this book that just really rang true to me. And I felt that your writing really conveyed it. You were confident enough to open doors that could have been pretty scary.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's some of the nicest feedback. I've had so many people reach out and say, wow, I come from this family or this world too. And it just rang true for me. And so that's always just such validation to hear that. So,
yeah, literally, I come from that world too. as far, we even have the Mamaroneck part of it.
Right. Right. That's right.
But, you know, I mean, that's the one thing that I loved about it is not only did you kind of celebrate their spoils, but I mean, you looked at their spoils, but you celebrated their triumphs too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that, you know, with Molly, that whole family was raising Molly. It wasn't just Denny and Teresa.
Right.
And I mean, some of the sweetest scenes were between Jackie and Molly.
Yeah, I agree. Those were fun to write. And they're definitely kind of a throwback, the Brennans, you know. So often these days you grow up and move somewhere and your siblings go somewhere else. Everybody becomes spread out, and here they're all kind of coming back together, which arguably there's too many people in the house probably. So we need to, but
everybody needs to start moving out.
Right. I tried to kind of get at that at the end there, but you know, when they needed each other, they definitely pulled together. And
well, you know, my dad's brother and his wife and their 4 kids lived with my grandparents until the kids were all almost teenagers.
Yeah.
So when we would come from the West Coast to visit, because we moved to the West Coast when I was young, but we, as you know, spent all summers in the hot New York or Connecticut summers.
Right.
And we were like a tribe, you know, because each of us had a cousin that was the same age as us.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like my dad's brother's wives and my mom all got pregnant at the same time, and we all had a cousin in our age group.
Yeah, that was one great thing. There was plenty of people all the time right around your age. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, we had so much fun. I mean, we used to tear through. My grandmother had one of those big houses, and we would tear through it the way you imagine the Brennans did.
Yeah. It's always was great fun. We had aunts and uncles come stay. I had uncles come live with us for months. They'd make some good money in construction and then go back, you know, to their families. And we spent a ton of time over there. And so yeah, it was special. It was definitely a highlight. I look back on all that very fondly, for sure.
Well, it's interesting too, because I just was reflecting on the fact that the structure of this family, it's not an enormous, I mean, right. It's not like 17 kids, but that actually there's only the one grandchild at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Am I correct? Yeah. So then you sort of wonder, like, specifically, like maybe for Jackie, is his life a little bit on hold, or has it been maybe partly because of how he participated in The Secret? And, you know, so almost like sort of what's the sequel to this story for all of them, right? You have your hopes for Denny and, you know, his wife and their family, but like, there's a couple things where you're like, well, what will evolve? I mean, Jackie maybe is the one that really strikes me as like, I don't know, it'd be interesting to imagine.
Yeah, I so enjoyed Jackie. He probably was one of the most fun characters to write for me. He just had kind of a fun edge, I thought. But that's kind of how I picture it, just as you said, that his life's been a little bit on hold. And, you know, the hope is now that things have kind of come out, they're dealing with a lot of this. I have high hopes for Jackie, but I do think he's been in a little bit of limbo because of his role in things and because he's kind of directionless at the moment. But, you know, hopefully by the end, he's sort of finding his way, I think.
Yeah.
So anybody listening on Zoom, if you want to put questions into the Q&A I'll read them out. And if we have a lot of people watching on Facebook right now too, so if you guys want to type your questions into Facebook, we can see if Tracey can try to answer some of them.
And we just have
I'll give you a couple.
We have 2 supportive comments. Genevieve says, I'm glad you pursued writing. I loved the book. And Nicole just said, loved it. So
thank you so much.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Really good. How many events have you been able to do to promote the book so far?
I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Lori Frankel a couple weeks ago.
Oh, very cool.
Really fun. Yeah, that was really cool. She's in Seattle, so we did like a Pacific Northwest bookstore. That was fun. And then just a couple of podcasts actually that haven't aired yet, but will. So that's all been new. That was a little nerve-wracking, but each time it gets a little bit easier. So, but everybody's been so wonderful and supportive, and so I've done several, and then there's a few over the next month or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But all virtual, even locally, that everything was still virtual now. So
yeah, I have a feeling that 2021 will be virtual also.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping maybe, but it does kind of,
yeah, for sure.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you was, why did you decide to have it set in a pub?
That probably is just experience too. It's just so Irish, right? The Irish pub, but I did have relatives that owned an Irish pub, and now another family I'm related to owns a pub now. So I did spend a lot of time in Irish pubs, and even though maybe one family owned it, again, it was kind of like your bookstore, I guess. Sounds like your family, we were always going in there and showing up, and a lot of things happened around the pub. So it just felt like kind of a natural setting that that's what Denny and Cal would own, and even though it was their business, everybody would kind of be part of it to some degree.
See, that's what I think of my store. I call it I call people part of the GGP family.
Yeah.
I just like everybody to feel like they're at home.
Yeah, definitely. That was my experience in Irish pubs, so I'm sure that's where that
well, and I also love the fact that in Ireland, all the kids are in the pub too.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. At least one of these pubs was in Ireland, but we always went there when we were over there, and kids, everybody. Yeah, just a place of celebration, and it felt feeling at home, really.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that being, the first time I walked into the pub and saw all the kids there, I went, oh my God. And then it was like, by the third night, I didn't care.
It's family time.
And, and then the whole family went on a pub crawl in Lahinch, the longest pub. There was a bunch of us. I think there was about 15 of us and about 4 cars which we shouldn't have been driving, but
I was going to say, that's some of the downside of that stuff, right?
But it, you feel automatically that you're part of it. Even if you didn't know them that well until you got there, and all of a sudden you left and you were best friends.
Yeah, you wanted to be part of it.
I mean, that's what I felt about your book, is I felt the connection. That whole connection within the community of like when they're in the pub, and Cale's with the musician, and the part where his ring catches the light and Sunday sees his wedding ring.
Yes.
But it was just, that's what Ireland feels like to me.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad it came across.
And also when we were suddenly I was flashing on being in a pub, and then was it Denny's wife when she comes in and she wants a banana daiquiri or something?
Oh, yes.
And then all of a sudden that just made me laugh in my head. I was like, that's hilarious to go into an Irish pub and order a banana daiquiri. And doesn't she see bananas? She's like, I see them right there. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And then he throws them away.
A couple people asked me about that, and it's based on a true story, but only the banana daiquiri part in the bar. It happened to a friend of mine who was bartending. Unfortunately, he did end up falling in love and getting married, but she did come in and come back with bananas, and I just put that away and thought, I got to use that. What a great way for people to meet. So.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's where that came from.
Yeah, I've been to other restaurants with like a deep cultural thing, and they're very instructive to you. They're like, you're doing it wrong. Like, you have to do it this way, and you go, okay.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing, so.
Yeah, it seemed perfect for them that would be the enough attitude from Teresa that Denny would certainly be intrigued. So. Right.
I feel like she's.
And I love the fact that Sunday, she kind of had Denny on a bit of a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
Like when she was talking about how he never went through the awkward phases.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was the superstar.
And
Yeah,
then, you know,
that's how mom felt about Denny. I think that kind of trickled down, and he is her big brother. And so, yeah, I think there was a little bit of idolizing Denny at times.
does anybody have any questions, guys? I mean, I love talking. I have like a bazillion questions. But I mean, it was so funny when I finished this book. I came in, I think I told you, Sam, I just read a book about my family.
Yeah. That's true.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. It really is. That's
Yeah,
great.
I mean, it was just so familiar to me and lovely. And I felt kind of wrapped in your words when I was reading it.
Thank you so much. Really, that's so nice to hear.
I mean, the only other book that remotely was Ask Again, Yes, was another book that did that for me.
Loved that book too. Loved it. Yeah. I thought that was really, really good.
So fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions out there?
Any questions from Facebook?
No, but we've got a lot of people watching.
Hi, everybody.
That's good.
I mean, I can see them coming on. They've been coming on all through the thing. We've got about 20 people watching on Facebook.
Oh, that's so nice. That's wonderful.
I recognize some of their names. Some I don't. Some are definitely. We've got a lot of Irish people watching, by the way.
Uh-oh.
Shocking. Well, I will tell everyone watching that we have plenty of copies in the store. So if you haven't yet purchased it, we definitely have them for you. So.
Okay, so Lisa has a question. She loved the book and the characters. Does the dynamic of a favorite son hold up in what you've observed, Irish families or families in general?
I certainly saw it a little bit, not to the same degree, probably. In my own family, I was the big sister, so that didn't happen. But in some, I could think of certain cousins that may have been, especially if they were super good at Gaelic football or something like that, kind of like Denny with soccer. There might have been a little of that, but that wasn't really based on anything in particular or anyone in particular. But it did seem like Maura would certainly appreciate Denny's, talents and just kind of, especially after her youngest son came along, it kind of gave her this focus and this champion to get behind. And so I don't know that you see that so much anymore. I can't say that I can think of any personal examples in my own life, but that's where that came from.
Yeah. I think what I still do see is like your kids come out with these very distinctive, personalities, and then we start to tell stories about them from the moment they're born, and you're like, well, this is how this person is, and this is how this person is, and sometimes those traits do carry on, but then I've often wondered, like, wow, did I just like build a whole thing around you? And
right, and it can become part of their identity. And then, it's difficult to be the little brother or sister to Denny or a Denny, so that's
it is.
It comes into play for Jackie, Sunday too, but Jackie in particular as a younger brother. So yeah, that certainly happens. And, my kids could not be any more different with different strengths and different, talents and flaws and all that good stuff. So sure, that still comes into play.
Yeah.
Well, I need to tell you that Samantha's son was the one how I got to know Samantha.
It's true.
She has a Ferdinand the Bull son.
Oh.
I do. He's built like a linebacker, but he's most definitely not. And
he's sniffing the flowers.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Very, very sweet guy. But it's funny because he's like, he is the older brother. I have a younger son, and my younger son now he's not quite as tall as his brother, but he's not a little kid anymore. And it's funny because he was such a little kid and people haven't seen him for, 2 years.
Yes.
They're sort of shocked that he got taller. He's just like,
yeah, I have some of that too. I have 2 boys 2 years apart, and the youngest one just shot up and out. Yeah. And people are like, what happened? Is that Ben? Yeah. He's like farm strong. I think I used that in the book. It was like super like thick and, but a big teddy bear too. Ooh, sorry. There you go. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so I think that we sort of can't help it in the comparisons too. Like,
Yes.
even if we're not actively sort of saying, you know, here's the favorite son, there just always are. It's just hard for us not to do that. And
or
yeah.
if they have a certain talent and they're super good at something, I just think sometimes being the younger sibling, it's harder to kind of find your spot, you know.
Yeah. Who am I? Who am I
Yeah.
in the group? And
well,
absolutely.
does anybody else have any more questions for Tracey? Tracey, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I can't tell you,
absolutely.
this has been such a delight to talk to you. And
for me
I
too.
I feel like our families could be related still.
I know, it sounds like it.
And I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank everybody on Facebook, and I want to thank everybody who's watching on Zoom. Let's go ahead and give Tracey a big hand.
Thank you all so much.
And remember, you can get, if you haven't gotten your copy of We Are the Brennans, we have copies at GGP. Mm-hmm. And Tracey, will you send us some book plates?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, you guys.